All right, so in this case reading video, we're going to be looking at the JC Williamson and Lukey case, which involved lollies. And making these slides made me ridiculously happy today, so I hope you also appreciate my gummy bears. All right, so this case actually deals with both specific performance and some general principles around injunctions, but for our purposes, we're more looking at it in terms of specific performance and when an order for specific performance might be denied. Okay, so in this case here, the plaintiff sued for breach of an alleged contract, which was supposedly a verbal agreement, under which they'd been granted the exclusive right to sell sweets in the defendant's theatre for a period of 5 years. After 3 years' time, the defendant granted the exclusive right to sell lollies or confectionery to another party, a third party. Now, this contract was actually the type of contract which needed to be in writing, and here it wasn't. So it was just a verbal contract. Okay, so ultimately, at trial, the judge held that there'd been acts of part performance. So if you remember back to formation last semester, if an act states, so here, for example, the Victorian equivalent of the statute of frauds, if an act states that a contract has to be in writing and the contract isn't in writing, then that contract will be held to not be legally enforceable for want of that statutory writing requirement. But where the equitable doctrine of part performance can be established, then you can potentially get an equitable remedy in those circumstances. So here there was an argument around part performance. And at trial, the trial judge held that there had been acts of part performance and that the defendant could be restrained by way of an injunction to prevent them from exercising the exclusive right to sell sweets. So to prevent someone else from coming in and selling the lollies in the theatre. And in the course of the High Court judgment, the judges look at injunctions as well as specific performance. But yeah, as mentioned, we're mostly interested in the specific performance aspects of the reasoning. In terms of the injunction aspect of the reasoning, the most relevant part of it for you guys is essentially just noting that an injunction can't be used as kind of like a roundabout backdoor way to specifically perform a contract. So here, the reason why it was relevant is that the plaintiff could either get a specific performance of the contract to make sure that they were able to continue to have that exclusive right to sell, or they could get the injunction to prevent the other party from getting someone else to come in and sell the lollies. So the remedies here are correlative, okay, which is why they both arise on the facts. And the court essentially says that you can't use an injunction to essentially get specific performance. In any case, going back to the argument here, so Lukey, the plaintiff, sought equitable remedies to enforce the agreement, and the defendant relied on non-compliance primarily with formalities for arguing that it wasn't an enforceable contract. Now, here it was held that specific performance is not available as a potential remedy, and they couldn't have specific performance because to do so would force the court to supervise too many aspects of the agreement. And I'll show you in a second the various aspects of the agreement. So you can see why the court was concerned, I guess, that the parties would just keep coming back before them. But yeah, so specific performance was denied here on grounds of the requirement to continually supervise the contract. And then you can have a look here at the various obligations. And there's the positive right and the negative right around which those specific performance and injunction arguments were made in the bottom right-hand side of the screen there. All right, so in terms of our case reading questions, why wasn't the alleged contract specifically enforceable? Now, if you have a look at Chief Justice Dixon's judgment, it gives you the best overview or the best answer. So in Chief Justice Dixon's judgment, it states the case falls outside the scope of specific performance. Specific performance is a remedy to compel the execution in specie of a contract which requires some definite thing to be done before the transaction is complete. The remedy is not available unless complete relief can be given and the contract carried into a full and final execution, so that the parties are put in the relation contemplated by their agreement. So specific performance is inapplicable when, and I've got the quote here at 298, it's inapplicable when the continued supervision of the court is necessary to ensure the fulfillment of the contract. It is not a form of relief which can be granted if the contract involves the performance by one party of services to the other, or that requires continual cooperation. Okay. In terms of the second question then, so although not referred to in these terms, Justice Dixon clearly invokes the principle of mutuality as well in the judgment. How does he express this idea? So the Court of Chancery was against decreeing one party to perform specific obligations which the contract imposed upon him. It was unable to secure to him performance by the other party of the conditions on which those obligations depended. And Justice Dixon continues by saying, in the present case, the condition entitling the plaintiffs to admission into the theatre is concurrent with conditions governing the time, place, manner, supply of goods. So remember back on our previous slide. And it would be contrary to principle to bind the company by a decree of specific performance to its obligations, leaving it only a remedy in damages in the event of a breach by the plaintiffs. It would be equally contrary to principle for the court to undertake supervision of the fulfilment of these conditions. It therefore could not be contended that a decree of specific performance might be made, and therefore it was denied here.